This session is Kumu 101, from zero to Kumu Map. What I'm going to be doing is really take you from the moment that you signed up to Kumu and are starting your project to eventually having at least a start of a Kumu Map that looks nice, that has all the data that you want in there, and that starts to begin to tell the story that you're trying to tell with the data visualization in Kumu. So the topics that we're going to go through today: what are the main uses of Kumu? I'll show you a couple of example maps. Second one is key differences between basic and pro plans. The third one is simple create an account and what does that account look like. Then the fourth is the biggest bucket that we'll be talking about today. So how to create your first project. Last question, where can I go to find help? And then we'll also do some more deep dives into Q&A at the end. So you can maybe share your maps, share any specific questions that you have regarding your map. First thing I'll go into is the Kumu gallery. So if you go to kumu.io, at the top you can choose gallery, and the gallery has a couple of examples of all the different types of things that you can do with Kumu. At its foundation is a relationship mapping tool. So you can map the relationships between any types of data. But in reality, Kumu is most often used for three different purposes. The first one is systems mapping. And systems mapping is a holistic approach to analysis that focuses on the causality between different factors and how they interrelate, how they work over time, and what their context is maybe within a larger system. So it's a way of making sense of complexity by looking at the parts that make up the system. You can see, for example, here, I'm going to dive into other maps as well, but I want to make sure that you know where to go in gallery. So this one, the climate change, is a systems map. The world problems is a systems map. And the behaviors of high-performing teams. So it always looks at one specific concept, and then what are all the factors that are influencing that concept, and also what are the consequences of that causality? Is it intended? Is it unintended? That's what a systems map looks at. The second purpose of Kumu Maps is network mapping. And with network mapping, we're really looking at a network of either people or organizations or maybe projects, but really how certain entities interrelate and how they have relationships. So for example, the Celebrity Ice Bucket Challenge is a network map. And here the Baltimore Stewardship Networks is a number of organizations. Those are good network maps. And then the third option that Kumu is often used for is community asset mapping. So that is usually combined with a geo-template, and it allows your viewer to see where to find certain services based on what their need is. So in this case, this is a great example of a community asset map, which I'll also show you in a larger version later. But yeah, those are the three main buckets. Of course, there's endless ways to map relationships and to tell stories. So I've seen people use Kumu to write down, to make resumes for themselves, to track certain characters in a book or in a play. There's really a lot of ways to use Kumu also for fun projects. Let me dive a little bit deeper into the types of projects we have. But before we do, I want to explain some of the terms that we use when we're looking at a Kumu map. So first, you have the elements. The elements are the circles that you see on the map, and they're connected with lines, obviously the connections, the relationships. And the last one is loops. And loops is basically that when you follow the connections and the arrows on the connections, that you come back to the first element. So it always, let me show you here. There's a circle. Those are loops. And when I click on any element, it shows me that element's profile with all different types of information. And this information is customized to whatever you want to show for that specific element. But this is called the profile, and these are called the fields within the profile. Then the third subject is the projects, the maps, and the views. So a project is this entire thing that we're looking at right now. This is a project with one data set, and it's called Challenges of Women in a City in Sri Lanka. And within a project, you can have different maps. So that's this first drop down here. And you can have different views. That's this drop down here. And maps and views allow you to look at the map look at the data from different angles. So we can change the coloring if we're changing views, or we can change the position of the elements if we're changing maps. So whenever you hear, okay, maps or views, then know that you can create multiple versions of this. In this case, there's only one map and one view, but you can create multiple of that. And I think that is everything here. So this is always a great document to read Kumu's architecture in the Kumu docs as well, to always come back to if you feel like, okay, I don't really know what this is. So as I promised, we're going to look at some examples of systems maps. I always really like this one because it's very complete, and it also allows you to kind of play dynamically with the data that we're seeing. So for example, let's hover over poverty. If you hover over an element, it'll automatically focus on its first degree connections and fade away the rest of the map. And that really helps to look a little bit deeper into what this map is about. So if we're looking here, we see poverty, then we see solid connections coming out of poverty, and we also see dashed connections coming out of poverty. That's done on purpose. The solid connections are positive. So let's say that poverty increases living in temporary houses, while the dashed version is the opposite. So poverty decreases the chance of a woman to obtain a bank loan, the one you can see here. The rest of the map uses coloring, which you can also see in the legend here, and I'll show you how to do that when we get to that point. Last part that I like about this map is that you can also focus on different topics. So if I just want to see cultural and social, I'll click here and it will just show me that part, which in this case is yellow. And that way I can kind of flip through this whole map and see what the subsystems are and how they are interrelated as well. That's a systems map. Another one that I really like is this map on anxiety-driven procrastination. It's a topic that many people will encounter every day, anxiety, and what makes it worse and what makes it better. So if you follow here, you have the escapism loop. If I hover over this label, then you can see that, okay, anxiety leads to overwhelm, leads to avoidance, leads to distraction, leads to guilt, leads back to anxiety. But there's also positive loops. So if I look at building momentum, this momentum creates more progress, creates pushing through, which creates more momentum. So yeah, this is really how you untangle the system of a certain phenomenon and look at all of the cause and effect. Try to understand better that if I were to interfere in this system, if I wanted to make it better, if I want to create change, where do I start? Where do I make an impact? And also, if I try to make an impact, where may I find some unintended consequence? Those are examples of systems maps. Now I'm going into a network analysis, and this is really one of the biggest networks that I have in Kumu. As you can see, this is very tangled together. There's a lot of data points, but as soon as I hover over a specific one, you can see that these are actually people that are working on certain projects and work on certain organizations. And now I can see a lot better what all their connections are. And that's the same here in this project. This project looks at Africa's 50 richest people and how they interconnect as in terms of where they're from, and also in what industry they work in the continent of Africa. So here, there's a community asset mapping. And what I like about this one is that they really just put a button at the top that says, what do you need help with? And if I click here, I can say, okay, I want an accelerator, which highlights all the accelerators on the map. And then if I click there, I can see, okay, this company or this organization, what do they do? What different tags are they a part of? So multiple categories. And what is their information? So how can I get in touch with them by going to their website? That's a community asset map. So before I dive into how to create a project, I wanted to show what the main differences are between a basic workspace and a pro workspace. So when I log into my Kumu account, you'll see a list, or in the beginning, you won't see any projects here, but over time, you'll see a list of all the different projects that you're a part of. So either that you created or that you've been invited into. Any new account is automatically on the basic workspace. So that's just the default account. Everyone is the basic workspace. Another option is to upgrade to a pro workspace. And a workspace can be seen as a folder in which the projects live connected to certain maybe like projects within your organization or certain companies. In my example, this is my basic workspace, Michelle Monti. I'm also a part of Kumu, and I'm also a part of Test Company and Project Restores. So when you upgrade to a pro workspace, there's a couple of advantages to that. So the first one is that you can invite people into the workspace and they'll be able to see all the projects that you have in that specific workspace. So that's very useful if you're working with the team and you don't want to invite everyone on the team into the same project every time. You just invite them into the pro workspace, and then they'll be able to see all of the projects that live in that pro workspace. The second option that you have within a pro workspace is to create teams. So let's say that you have 10 different projects in your workspace. These are all the members and these are all the projects. Let's say that I have 10 projects, but I only want Jeff to be able to see 3 of those projects and the rest should not be visible to him. Then you can create something called teams and you can assign which team is able to see what. Another option of the pro workspace is archiving. So archiving means that once you finish the project, in terms of you're no longer actively working on it. If you want to keep it private, then you can archive it. So you won't be able to edit it in real time at that moment, but you can keep showing it to anyone that you want to show it to, and it'll remain private. So that means you won't be paying for it anymore. Pro workspaces also allow for discussions, which is a thread inside of the project, so that with your team in real time, you can talk about the projects and kind of jam on what you want it to look like. Another thing that is an option is an activity list, so you can see who made which changes at what point. It also allows for branding. So when I load a Kumu map, it shows the logo of Kumu, but you can also change it to your own logo. So those are just a few of the benefits of the Pro Workspace and what a workspace is exactly. And if you want to see the pricing differences, because I won't be going into that too much, you can always visit kumu.io/pricing or just click pricing at the top. And then you can see here again what the differences are and the differences in pricing. So like I said, when you create an account, if you go to kumu.io and you click sign up, you can go through the process of creating an account. And then you'll have an empty space here that says, try your first new project. So you'll click here to create your new project. Page asks you what workspace you want the project to be a part of. So if I want it to just be my own workspace or the ones that I've shared with others. Again, be reminded that if I create it in Kumu, that everyone that's a part of Kumu will receive a notification that I created this project. So maybe you want to start off being a little more private, then you can say, I'm just going to keep it in my personal workspace. You give it a name, a description if you want, and here you can decide whether you want it to be public or private. A public project really is public to everyone that wants to see it. It's indexed on Google. It's a part of our public project database. So anyone that wants to see the project or finds the URL can access it. If you don't want that to happen, then I would suggest clicking on private, and then you'll start paying $9 a month, and we create the project. Okay, so now we're going to see an empty project, and usually that's the point for a lot of Kumu users that feels a bit overwhelming. There's this white canvas, and we don't really know where to go next. So first, you're asked to pick a template, and especially if you're not really familiar with Kumu yet, you might think, okay, but I don't know which template I want to use yet. There's a little bit of an explanation here at the bottom for each different template, but you can always change your template afterwards. So yeah, just pick whatever feels good to you right now. If you want to change it, you can do so at any moment. So you give the map a name. You decide whether you want your elements to be fixed or floating. Floating means that Kumu decides where to place the elements, and fixed means that you indicate where you want the elements to live, and you pin them in place. And the connections, you can have them be directed with an arrow, mutual with double arrows, for undirected, meaning there's no arrows on your connection. Then you say get started, and we have the empty project. Here on the left-hand side is the map description. It's the description that everyone that enters your map will see. So I usually use it to describe a little bit about the project that I'm working on, any information that I feel like the viewer needs to know, any explanation of how the Kumu map works. I put all of that here. And then here, this is obviously where your map will appear. Before we put some data into the map, I'll show you what all of the different menus are. So here in the top left corner is the project settings. And anything that you do here applies to the whole project. So you can look at the fields in the project, who are members, contributors of the project, the trash, admin to maybe change the privacy or rename your project. Any of the information here is really global for everything that happens here. Then I already showed you the map dropdowns here, but also here I can click to create a new map because I'm editing now. So now I can see that button. In the bottom left corner, there's help. You can always access documentation. We have a Slack community, and you can also contact support. There's also a little undo button. A lot of people kind of glance over it, don't see it. But if you deleted something or you change something, you don't like it, hit undo. It's just a Control Z of your map. This is the button to add data to your map, which I'll get to in a second. And here in the bottom right corner, there's quick actions, which is like a quick actions menu. There's metrics, which are social network analysis metrics that kind of calculate certain metrics about your network. It's usually used in combination with network mapping. We'll go into that in a separate webinar. The discussions, which I showed you here, if you have a pro workspace, and the table. The table is basically an Excel overview of what your Kumu project looked like. So all of the data that's in it from the back end. I usually use table, and I'll show you what table looks like in a finished project, but I usually use it just for overview. I don't really use it for editing. I don't find it very fast to do editing, but just know that you can actually edit. I could technically type here and build out my map. Then here you can export your map at any point to a PDF, a PNG, so an image, an Excel, or a JSON file. And especially the JSON file is very useful because it can be used for versioning. A JSON is a complete backup of your project, including all of the data, all of the visualizations, the locations, everything. Use it whenever I'm going to make big changes because let's say that I do something wrong or I do something I didn't like, then I can always restore the previous JSON. Similarly, if I feel like I'm finished with Kumu for a couple months, I'll export it to JSON. Then you can delete the project. And then once you're ready to pick it back up, you can import it again. And here's a little bit more info on sharing and embedding your map, which I'll show you at the end. And then finally here, you can enter full screen or you can switch to preview mode. So kind of seeing what your map looks like to people that are viewing it. And these controls I'll get into in a moment because that's where all the magic happens for your Kumu map. So in terms of gathering your data, the Kumu map is only as good as the data that you put in it. So unfortunately, there's no magic way for Kumu to gather the data for you or to kind of fill in the gaps. It's really important for you to find the data that you need to be able to make this visualization. And that data can be different things, right? It can be the system that you're brainstorming in your head. Okay, this interacts with this factor, so it needs to be connected. Another way is to kind of survey with other people. What do they think? Who are their relationships? What is their view on the system? To kind of gather it like that. And of course, if you export from an external database, then you already usually have the data in Excel form, and you just have to convert it in a way that Kumu understands, which I'll get to in a moment. But yeah, gathering the data is really important. And usually what I say, there's two ways to go about it. Either you can make sure that you have all the data beforehand because it's important to get all your data in first before you start visualizing. But sometimes you haven't quite figured out yet how you want to structure the data to look like in Kumu. And in those cases, I say, okay, start with a smaller subset. So let's say that you have 2,000 people that you want to put into a network map, but you don't really know what information you want on them and how they're connected. I would say like maybe put in 10 people in Kumu first, figure out how you want them to be visualized in Kumu, and then export your map to Excel and continue working off of that structure. So those are the options. I showed you here, there's a big green button with a plus, and there's multiple ways to, once you have gathered the data, to import it into Kumu. So the first option is to build it by hand. And usually when it comes to systems mapping, people build it by hand because the system is kind of still in their head or it's still being brainstormed. So you would say like, add elements. Okay, I want to look at climate change. That's one element now. And then I want to see another element that's carbon emissions. And then I want to see how they're connected. So I'll say connection, carbon emissions connects to climate change. As you can see, this requires quite a lot of clicks. And if you're trying to build out a map a little bit faster, there's an easier way to do that. And it's called Sketch. You can see it here. And it allows you to simply click on any spot on the map and then build it out. So we can again say deforestation. And then I want to deforestation creates this. And you simply drag that information together. Let's just put it like this. So I can show you what a loop looks like. I'll exit sketch mode. And then if I want to create a loop, I can say add loop, and I'll just have to indicate what connections I want them to be a part of the loop. And then I can say, this is the climate vicious cycle. Okay, so now if I hover over this, it includes this whole loop. But of course, sometimes there's, you already have the data, you don't want to build it by hand. And in that case, you would import the data through Sheets. So first I'm going to delete all of this. There's some keyboard shortcuts that you can use in Kumu. If you click on A, for example, it selects all your elements. And now I can either click backspace on my keyboard, or I can click here to delete all the data. And import, there's 3 different options. The first one is Excel, the second one is Google Sheets, and the third one is JSON. This is the same as the export to JSON. This is how you import it again. But you can also connect to a remote JSON, which is basically a connection between an external platform and Kumu. You can kind of see it as an API, though it's not really an API. But yeah, that is an option. But by far the most used is the Excel or Google Sheet. In terms of the differences between the two, Excel is usually used when you want to pin elements in certain places, because that's not possible with Google Sheets. And with Excel, once you import a file, whenever you want to make changes to that file, you have to re-import a new file. So it's a little bit more manual. The Google Sheet, on the other hand, allows you to connect to the Kumu map in real time, so that anytime you make additions to the Google Sheet, you simply refresh the Kumu map, and then it brings all that data in to the Kumu map. So I usually use Google Sheets just because I find it easy to go back and forth between the data and the map as I'm working on it. But a downside of that is that it doesn't allow you to pin elements in place. So every time that you refresh the map, the elements are in a different place because Kumu decides where to place the elements. Now I'm going to show you an example of what the finished map looks like. A finished Excel looks like. And we're going to do a separate webinar that really goes into the whole import process and like how to structure the data and how to think about structuring the data. But I'm just going to go into this really quickly here. So if you're looking at the Excel sheet, at the top, you'll see the first row. These are all of the columns titles, and they turn into fields in the map, default fields in Kumu. So the first column should always be label, and label is the name of the element and the unique identifier. So label can be duplicates, can be the same thing. There is a way to use them, to use the same name for multiple elements, but it's a workaround. And again, I'll get into that in the import webinar. But the first column is always label. And then we look at the type, which is a categorization for a single field value. So an element can only belong to one type. On the other hand, with tags, you can have multiple tags. So one element can belong to multiple categories. And the last one is, description. And in the description, you can include any information that you want, more as kind of a free flow text. So if I click here, I can see a lot of information, and here are the type, and these are the tags. And any of the columns that come after are fields that are shown in Kumu this way. So any of the columns that are green here come in this shape here at the bottom. And this can really be an unlimited number of fields, and you decide what you want to show in those fields. And then, any information that you want to put here, you can. So this is the Elements tab that creates the circles. The other option is the Connections tab, and it creates the connections. So if I here put Raymond and he's connected to Reginald. That's how you build out your connection sheet, and each row is one connection. And then you can put in any information here. Again, the blue ones are the standard fields. These from and to are mandatory for Kumu to understand, and these are customized. Oh, one other thing is that you can have a connection sheet without an element sheet. So Kumu will simply create an element for each from and to that you create. And likewise, you can also have an element sheet without a connection sheet, because then you'll just have the circles and not the connections. But if you want to have information in the profiles of both elements and different information in the profiles of connections, then it's important to create these two tabs. Then I'll start importing this into Kumu. So you copy the link from the top right, and then you simply go to your map, you click import, and this is a private sheet, so I'll paste it here, import spreadsheet. So basically, I first have to give Kumu the permission to access the Google data. We are not able to see any other data than the data that you need for your Kumu map. Okay, so then Kumu reviews the sheet if it understands it. If it doesn't understand it, it'll indicate this little icon. So now I can see, okay, there's no connections. In this case, that's fine because I'm going to create my connections differently. But if there's any errors or Kumu doesn't understand, it'll let you know here. So now I can say save imports, and all of the data is here. Okay, so once we have all the data in, we're going to start playing with the editors. So if you click on settings here on the right-hand side, there's has the basic editor, which allows you to make changes just by pressing a couple of buttons. And we have the advanced editor. And the advanced editor is really writing out the code, the coding rules for the map visualization. A lot of people find that very overwhelming. There's no need to be in here either if you don't want it. So definitely ignore it if you don't like it. But here with just a simple press of a button, I can start visualizing. So let's say that I want to start coloring by industry. There's multiple industries. Let's say location, so country. That instantly colors my map, and I can also change it to other color schemes. So I can say I like this one better. Again, you can also play with shaping, also location. So now you'll see these different shapes here. And I can also size. Let's say I want to size by net worth. I can immediately see, okay, who are the really rich people in this map and who have a little bit less money. So that's a quick and easy way to start decorating. Other option is to look at the structure. So I can say I want to connect. I didn't create connections because I want Kumu to create the connections for me. And you do that by connect by. So I want all the people to connect by the industry that they work for. So you just can play around with this a lot. And of course, all of this is based on the data that you have in the profile. So sometimes you might say like, hey, I want to color by a certain field, but I don't feel like I have that information yet. Then what you can do is you can click on any element. And if you're importing through Excel, you can make changes directly in Kumu. But since I'm importing with Google Sheets, if I want to add some new data, I'll have to do that in the Google Sheets. So I can simply create a new column here with a new category, and then fill it out for everyone. And then as soon as I refresh the page, that information will be drawn in, and I can use it to color by. So all of this is decorating based on, like I said, the data in the profiles. Another option is to decorate with something called direct decorations. If I hover over this element, I see this little pencil, and I can make decorations here directly. One thing to remember is that direct decorations always trumps data-driven decorations. So sometimes I'll make some changes in here, but I don't see it actually changing my map. In that case, I'll have to reset the direct decorations, and I'll move over to data-driven decorations. I want to show how to decorate elements. So let's say I don't want to decorate all my elements based on one field. I want it to be more specific. So let's say that I want all the people that are located in Tanzania. I want them to be purple. You can, choose any field to kind of indicate what you want to update. And then you can click change color, and I'll say I want it to be purple. And here I can decide whether I want it to show in the legend. In this case, Tanzania already shows in the legend because I'm coloring by it, but I'll also add this one. And now you can see here that Tanzania 2 is right there. And this is It's a little small to see right now, but you can see that these have turned into purple. So this gives you a little bit more specific control over decorating elements or decorating connections. And if you click decorate connections, it works the exact same way. I can say these connections, I want to change the style, so I want them to be dashed. You can do all of that here. And then lastly, the add custom control is the one that I showed you here. So controls allow you to dynamically play around with the map. This is what it does. And there's multiple different ways to build those controls. We're going to also have a webinar specifically about controls and how complicated and how advanced you can make them. But you can always play around with them, because as soon as I open this menu, you can see here that these buttons start popping up. And if I click on Africa's 50 Riches now, it takes away the industry. And you can also change it to a label, which aesthetically looks a little bit different. And you can change it to a drop down. And a drop down is useful if you have a lot of different options, which I'll show you in a moment in projects that I'll show right now. Projects in the wild. This it has a lot of different controls. And as you can see here, this is just a super long list. So if I were to make this into buttons, it would be too many buttons. So now it allows me to filter down depending on what I want to see. Then the last thing I wanted to show about fixed, and I explained to you a little bit about fixed and floating already, that if it's fixed, the elements stay in one place. And if it's floating, that as you can see here, if I change this, it kind of like Kumu rearranges everything. Another thing that you can do is snap your elements to either a circle or a line. And there's two ways to do it. There's one way to do it manually. So I select 4 different elements, then I right click on the map and I say snap to, and I want to make a perfect line. They're now perfectly aligned. And by scrolling, I can make them bigger and smaller. If I right click again, I can say snap to center, and they'll be in the very center of the map. So that's one option. Another option is to snap it to a circle, but I can also do this automatically. And this is especially useful for connections to Google Sheets, because though you're not able to pin elements in place specifically where like random locations, but you can tell Kumu that you want it to snap to a perfect circle every time you open the map. So that's done here. If you go to snap to, I can say, I want all elements to snap to a perfect circle. And as soon as I save that, it will update all the connections as well. Let's say I want to edit that. Then I click here, and I can also say I don't want all of the elements in a circle. I only want the element type to be this one, Africa's 50 Riches. I only want the people to be in a circle and the industry is not. So if I use this selector, that updates, and the rest goes back to that force-directed layout where Kumu decides where to place your elements. You can also change it to a line. Here you have a line. In this case, the angle is 45, but I can also make it 90. So we have a vertical 180 to make it a horizontal line. So you can really play around with that. You can also change the space between the elements. So right now it's 100. If I change it to 200, there'll be more space between the elements. And what's really neat about this is, let me change it back to a circle just because I like that more visually. What's really neat about this is that as soon as I save it, this is now a part of the advanced editor. And the advanced editor are all of the rules that you set for the visualization, right? Anything that I do in the basic editor gets translated into the advanced editor. And now this specific line says that all the elements with element type Africa's 50 Riches have to be, their position should be in a circle and with some more specific information. So every time that I refresh the map now, even if I add new data, Kumu's going to create this perfect circle. Once that our map is finished and we like the way that it looks, you can decide to start sharing it. There's multiple ways to share it. So if you have a public project, which this one is, you can simply copy this URL and share it with anyone that you want to see the project. So they'll see it as it looks right now. So they'll also see the settings button, and they'll see the project overview on, the map description on the left-hand side. Another option is to share an embed link, and an embed link allows people to look at the map, but they don't see this whole area outside. So they only see the inner part of the map. And what's useful about an embed link is also that your project may be private, but with an embed link, you can still have people that access the embed link, that they can still see it. Or you can even password protect an embed link. So that way you can kind of play around with different tiers of privacy depending on who you're working with and what data you're working with. And then the last option is to create a presentation. And a presentation is just like PowerPoint, but with an active Kumu map inside of it. So you can play around with the Kumu map in the same way that you're doing right now. This is, for me, it's one of my favorite things. I love presentations because you can add extra narratives, but you can kind of control how a person goes through your map. Because sometimes when people are not familiar with Kumu and they enter a map like this, they might not know what to do or how to get there. But a presentation allows them to go through it like that. What a presentation looks like, this is also a really great presentation. If you click on it, first is an explanation on systems practice, and it shows the whole system. And then as you go through it, it explains different parts. So that's what I always like. It really first explains how to use a Kumu map, and then it goes into different parts of the system. So you're really untangling that complexity. This one, it starts out with the core story. What's the cycle, like the core cycle of trauma in the rural South in this case? And then as soon as you go through it, you'll go dig deeper, and trauma hurts, generational trauma. You go through this whole map, and while people are in it, they can still click anywhere, or they can see here. It's a very interactive way to share it, and definitely a lot of organizations or journalists have used Kumu in this way. Yeah, this is usually how I start my Kumu maps, and you can really do this again and again and again. Gather your data, put it in a sheet, or put it into Kumu directly. Once you have all your data in, start playing around with the basic editor. Then when you feel like you're missing data, always you can export to Excel or go back to your Google Sheet and add more data. Yeah, it's really like a trial and error process to get to the best version. But once you've created a couple of these maps, or once you really dove into one map very specifically, you'll see that this is just a repetitive process once you know where to go. And then lastly, what I wanted to show you is how to find inspiration. So there's a couple of different resources that we have. If you go to our import guide, the first step is how to structure your data for Kumu. If you want to have some examples, we have some here. Oh yeah, here, get your hands dirty. We have a couple of public data sample sets, and also the maps that we created out of them. They're linked inside of that file. So you can play around with other data and what it looked like. And in terms of example maps, of course, you have the gallery. You can always look through the gallery, but we have a super comprehensive set of projects that we encountered. We call that in the wild, because usually we're just like doing something else, and then we see Kumu map, we instantly recognize it. And so this projects in the wild, it shows all of the different projects that we encountered, and you can filter because there's so many by now, but it explains a little bit how to use this map. It also gives some commonly requested examples. And here I can say like, okay, I only want to look at agriculture maps, and then it'll go down to that. I can hover over these to find a quick example of what it looks like and where I can find them. And it's super cool. There's so many maps in there that I even haven't discovered yet. So you can always play around with this, or like certain templates, what year they were built in. So that's Kumu projects in the wild. If you search for kumu.io/Kumu/projects in the wild, you can always find them. You can even add your own project. Another thing that we have to find some more examples is the community. If you go to kumu.io/community, you can see a lot of examples. Here you can say, for example, climate, and it'll show all of these maps. And usually I look for the maps that have the most visits. So obviously this one, because it has 18,000 visits, I'm pretty sure that that's going to be a good map. This one with only 8 visits, probably not finished yet. Another thing you can do is click on presentations, and you'll only find finished presentations. So this one is a lot better to find like the finished projects. And what we also do, if you all have social media, we every week we highlight some maps on social media. If you ever need inspiration, it's also very cool to follow us on your favorite platform, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. We have it all. Last thing, where can I go to get support? As I said, the Kumu Docs is a really great set of explanations on where to go and what to do. We have a YouTube channel, Kumu, that has more visual explanations. All of our quick tips are definitely on there. Our webinars are also on there, going to be on there. And again, you can always send us an email. You can always set up a call with us, a 30-minute Zoom call where we go into your map where you can share your screen. We're aware that Kumu has a little bit of a steep learning curve, so we try to help you as much as possible to get going. If you feel like Kumu is too far in the process of brainstorming to be useful, we also have something called Sticky Studio, and it allows you to really have that brainstorming session with others in the same room. So you can be on a call together, working on a certain map, and you can see what everyone's doing and writing. And we use it a lot internally. And once you have done your systems mapping or your brainstorm, you can export it directly into Kumu and start making the visualization a little bit more professional. But this is always great for just like a very simple version of brainstorming a system. That's Sticky.studio if you're interested. We're actually rebuilding Kumu entirely with the main focus becoming more intuitive. We want Kumu to be easier to work with. We want Kumu to just look better, to be easier to create maps and faster. And there's also a lot of new features that we want to add that it was just became too difficult to add in Kumu V2. So we're working on that right now. And if you have any questions about what that'll look like or what is staying, what is leaving, spoiler alert, most things stay and get even better, but there's also some things that are leaving. We also have a Discord, which you can find all the way at the end of the blog. But if you want to share your input on how things can get better, should be better, then we'd love to hear your feedback through the Discord server.